Our next speaker is Emma Bass. Clap, if you like. She's great. Yeah, you can do the whoop if you like. Thank you. She's wonderful, Emma. She's got a really diverse portfolio, but she's got at the same time a distinctive eye, if that makes sense. So broad range of subjects, but a distinctive eye. She has photographed all the famous people in New Zealand. All of them. She has. She really has. I saw a list. I'm not going to read it out, but she has. She is doing this lovely work called Imperfect, which is about the transition of flora. I'm not going to tell it. She should probably tell it. And this is the project that I think she's doing with Jeff Blackwell, which was mentioned yesterday. So we hopefully hear a bit about that. She also said she loves housework. She hates housework and loves music. And she has a pet cockatiel. Ladies and gentlemen, Emma Bass.
He didn't say that. He said he wasn't going to say that anyway. Hi, I'm Emma. I thought you were all leaving, but you're just moving back. Photography for me is like music. It has a rhythm and a flow. And the score I seem to have been writing is eclectic. There's a lot of life in there, and there's a little bit of death. Life is not perfect. It has its ups and its downs. It ebbs and it flows. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey of my life. I mean, I really didn't quite know what to sort of show, but I'm just going to show you everything right back from the beginning, just to show how it's all kind of connected and how it's kind of contributed to where I've ended up today and what I'm doing today with all my personal work. So this is me. I was born in Liberia, a little white girl amongst the vibrant rhythms of Africa. I love African music. We lived here for 2 years while my father was doing tropical medicine. Actually, I need the little remote. We lived here for 2 years while my father was doing tropical medicine. That's just me in the middle there. This is my father, the quintessential, slightly eccentric English gentleman. This is my father aged 4 with his father. This is a really poignant image to me because his father was about to go to the war and his father never returned. This is the last photograph ever taken with his son, my father. This is the grandfather that I never knew. This is my mother, English 60s, vibrant, dynamic mother of 4. She was a radiographer. My parents met in London in a hospital when they were working. So this is me and my mother. We were in Africa for 2 years before returning back to England to live, which is where my parents were both from. So my father got a job in New Zealand, and this image is just taken just before we're about to come out. That's me sitting with my little Barbie doll, and you can see the Queen is just, well, it's quite hard to see in this light, but the Queen is just giving her Christmas message on the television screen. And I was just trying to imagine what New Zealand would be like, and for me I had this whole idea that I'd be going to a school in a desert, in a little shack. That's what my impression of New Zealand back then was. New Zealand really felt like another world. So we came here when I was about 6. I'm the eldest of 4 children. This is me and my siblings, with our matching Marks and Spencer's outfits. My mother had impeccable fashion sense. This is my husband Dave, who I met 22 years ago at photography school. We have 2 children. We have Olive, who's 13, and George, who's just turned 5. And we have a pet cockatiel who has mastered all our ringtones in our house. He's mastered the alarm code, and he's also mastered the washing machine spin cycle. He's very, very talented. It gets quite confusing, quite loud. Of all the things I love to photograph, I love photographing my children. I really had this whole romantic idea that I'd have this wonderful kind of collection of images that were like Sally Mann images of children on the cusp of childhood transforming into young teens. This is Olive when she was 11. But sadly, my children aren't as into it as I am. And all these images were taken with bribery and corruption. I had to pay them. Usually the currency was lollies. But I do enjoy taking their photographs. Usually when I bring out my camera, there's this huge screwed up face and turn away. It's a bit of a battle. This was a rare moment of cooperation. So I started out my life as a nurse. When I left school, I went and trained. And as a young 21-year-old, I went off to London. I lived there for 2 years. And I was working in a hospital where I had access to a dark room, and I was given the key, which was pretty amazing. And I've been taking photographs since I was about 13, always fascinated, always just annoying every family member with my camera. And so for me, being away from all that, and being in London and having this wonderful dark room, I just spent every waking moment, every spare minute just roaming the streets of London and Europe when I went on my travels, just taking photographs very, very simply with a little simple Pentax and a fixed 50mm lens. And these are some of the sorts of images that I would be taking. This is a selfie of me on top of a double-decker bus a long time ago. Just random moments that I just come across with my camera. All sorts of sort of documentary, reportage moments. There's a lady in Crete. Abstractions, I was kind of interested in getting other little perspectives of abstractions, the way light was falling. I really love this image. It's a real juxtaposition of old and new. It's a very old building in Denmark with the very ancient beams, and then it's juxtaposed with these very young saplings coming up in front of it. It's just a really lovely graphic image. So when I was in London, I did a course at the Camera Club, which was in Leicester Square, which is a fabulous location to be in. And we had a little mini exhibition there. And I got a phone call out of the blue from an advertising agency saying, "We really love your eye. Would you be able to come in and show us your portfolio?" And of course I had no portfolio whatsoever. I had a pile of crude prints. So I went in very, very nervously and sort of put them on the table. And they said, "Well, we really like the way you see the world. We'd like to give you this job." And the job turned out to be a 3-day shoot with a studio and a big group of crowd that I had to manage. And I realised that it was way beyond my capability, so I very politely declined, but it got me thinking. And so it made me think that I should maybe study and learn all those skills that I needed to. So when I did get offered a job again like that, I'd be able to do it. So I returned to New Zealand, and I came back and I ended up working for 2 years in an intensive care unit as a nurse again, just to get my feet back again. And when I was on a trip down to Coromandel one day, I came across this very decrepit old junkyard in Thames, and it was just filled with rubbish everywhere, just sort of old metal tins. Everywhere was just this ugly kind of rubbish yard. And I got really intrigued with it, because within this rubbish yard were all these just little moments of beauty, very little miniature landscapes, and I would spend every day that I had off, I'd just drive down. There is a slightly compulsive, obsessive side to me, I would say, but I would just drive down and take these little images of all these different compositions and colours and textures, and they really kind of filled me up. And so after this, eventually after 2 years, I really felt that I just wanted to get out of hospitals. I didn't really want to work as a nurse anymore, even though I really, had a bit of a natural calling to being a nurse and I enjoyed it. I wanted to try something else, and I really had this calling to learn a bit more about photography. So I applied to Carrington Polytech, which was now Unitec, which was a 2-year diploma course. And I thought I'd show you just a couple of assignments that we had to do as students, because they do kind of slightly relate back to me as a person and what I'm doing now. One of the first assignments we had to do was to layer an image, and this was all pre-digital, I will note. And so what I did was I layered the previous images that you've just seen onto human bodies using a slide projector. And I was really fascinated by what the images were doing to the human skin. The body seemed to take on a whole new context. And to me, these look like garish skin conditions or hollowed out empty bodies. So following on from that, we had another assignment that was of a similar ilk. My obsessive compulsive nature again, I discovered this book in the library by this guy called Basilius Besler, who was a botanist and pharmacist from the 1600s, and he had made this incredible book, which I just couldn't get enough of. It was huge. It was probably about this big, and it was basically a plant atlas. Whoops, I'm a bit caught up here. It was basically a plant atlas. He'd made these amazing engravings of plants, and the way he'd done these plants was, it was quite groundbreaking, because previous centuries they'd all been very kind of unaesthetic and inaccurate and not at all well drawn. But anyway, the most extraordinary drawings, and apparently the actual publications were so big they had to be transported in a wheelbarrow. So I got really, and he really had this human-like quality that he kind of injected into these drawings. So what I did was I projected these onto a body, and eventually printed these up. And these were actually exhibited and ended up going to the Wallace Art Awards, and I think they purchased 3 of them, which are in their permanent collections. That was my first kind of little first little foray into exhibiting images. Now, another project that we had to do was a documentary assignment. And when I was a nurse working in hospitals, I encountered death, as you do, and I was really interested in it being a very taboo subject. Well, in Western society it appeared to be anyway. I remember when we had a body that had died, when a person who died, we would have to close the doors, we'd have to pull the white sheet up after you'd washed the body, usually with another colleague, another nursing member, and you'd wait till after the visiting hours were over, and you'd ferry the body back down the back corridors and out the back lift. It was all very hush-hush, nobody sort of mentioned it. And I was really honoured to look after a young girl who died very tragically at 22 of hepatitis C. And she was of Maori descent, and her whole family, her whole whānau came into the room. There was about 10 of them, and they were all there with me washing the body. They were all crying, laughing, telling stories. It was an incredible experience, very cathartic, and I was really struck by how our Western approach was just so different to other cultures. So I wanted to do some documentary assignment that was quite confronting, that was about the physicality of death. And I managed to get access into a mortuary, and the whole proviso was that I made the images very unidentifiable. It was a very sensitive thing to be photographing, so it was quite challenging to come up with some images that were explaining the subject but were also anonymous. So I presented these images in a book form, and what was really interesting, that only half the class would look at them. The other half just couldn't go near it or open it. But I did have one a fellow student who came to me a few months later and said, "Look, I have to thank you, Emma. I have to say that I did eventually bring myself to open the book and look at the images, and it really helped me get over the grief of my father who had died 6 months earlier." So for me, it was, the images were doing some sort of service. So when I was a nursing student, I was studying at Carrington Polytech, which was adjacent to the old Carrington Hospital, the psychiatric hospital. And when I was a nursing student, I had done a stint of a month and a half as a nursing student within that institution when it was a psychiatric hospital. And it was a very, very disturbing place. And I really remember it being very claustrophobic. Everything was under lock and key. It was like being in a smokestack. Everybody chain smoked. And it really was a bizarre place, bizarre people, bizarre, even the staff were quite unusual. And as a young person, you know, in the early 20s, it certainly made an impression. So it was really interesting for me when they planned to make this hospital into the design school. And there was a period of a few weeks where everybody had actually vacated the building. And I managed to get in and wander around, and I took my camera in, and I took this series of quite haunting images of the space as it had just been left. So this is a bit of a documentary series, but this was one of my favourite images. They did a lot of art therapy, the patients, And this is one of my favourite ones of the cherry blossom. This one here, I walked into the room and there was a pair of old shoes just sitting there on the floor. And it was as if somebody had just kind of launched into a new reality, which is often they were. They were in their own little separate realities. Pairs of pyjamas just hanging in the doorways. Finger marks. Everywhere was decay, little bits of decay everywhere. And I got really quite fascinated by corners, and of course they're often in corners, backed into corners. And the seclusion rooms, they had these seclusion rooms where if anybody was getting out of hand, that they would sedate them and put them in straitjackets and then put them in these little small rooms that were painted these very sickly, supposedly calming shades of pink. This is actually quite a profound image, but sadly you can't really read it in this light, but it's got a light switch on and a light switch off, and some patients written under it, unseen, unknown, unheard in their writing, which I found very poignant and quite sad. So, I finished my 2 years at Carrington Polytech. I just wanted to say also that I've been back to talk in this building in its new entity as a teaching institution, a design school. And whenever I walk into the space, you can really feel this sense of weirdness kind of exuding from the walls. It's a very interesting place to have a creative institution. Whoops. So I left Polytech and I decided that I didn't want to go back into hospitals. So I decided I just wanted to go and find work and try and earn some money as a photographer. So I got this portfolio together and I went around all the magazines. And I started taking photographs of people, which was my forte back then. So these are some of the portraits that I was taking. This is Ewan Gilmore in the back of a sex shop on K Road, which is a really interesting location. Pre-digital, double exposure, he's whipping himself. And this is also pre-digital. This is a very intricately printed image that I had to take 2 exposures for. This is Alan Bro, the comedian, and I photographed one in the studio with some parsley in front of his gonads, and one of the meat market on Ponsonby Road. I don't know if it's still there. I think it is. And then I had these 2 separate negatives, which I had to carefully kind of print onto one piece of paper. So it took quite a lot of dodging and burning to get the right amount of exposure. I really love graphic imagery with bodies and people and movement. And it's always quite a joy when you meet somebody who can kind of meet you on that level and can pull these amazing poses. This is an American actor, John Freeman. And I also really love art directing. That's why I love editorial, because you do get a lot of freedom. This was Angela Bloomfield, and I was just told to go and photograph her with lots of pink things around her. So I spent a day sourcing as many things that I could find that were pink, and then I just quickly threw it all together and came up with that, which was a bit of fun. This was a fun job. This was a job for Fashion Quarterly quite a few years ago, and it was photographing 100 women from 1 to 100. And there were 5 photographers who got 2 decades each, and I got the 40-year-olds and the 80-year-olds, and this was a couple of nurses, and so I found a theatre that I could photograph this Red Cross in. But I also got to do the 80-year-olds, and I do have to say that the women as they got older got more interesting. And in an age that we live in, where we're all trying to sort of, get the lighting right and get rid of the wrinkles, these women's faces were telling stories, and I found their faces were far more compelling the more wrinkles they had and the more, stuff they had going on in their faces, and they moved. Lucy Lawless. And often when you're photographing people for a magazine spread, you have to come up with about 4 different looks. So you have to be quite quick on your feet thinking on your feet. So you have to come up with quite different images that will all tie together in the same story. And I really enjoy that challenge of just quickly coming up with some ideas, and you have to collaborate with what clothes are available. I really like to bring out the strength in women when I'm photographing them. That's Jackie Fahey, the artist. I love photographing artists. That's John Rabbit, who I believe is here somewhere. Is that correct? This is actually, this was a lovely job. I photographed this in my studio, and that background's actually my old duvet cover, which I've still got. And we just got some ready lawn, but that was a fun little job to do. This is Jeff Thompson, the corrugated iron artist, pre-digital double exposure with his medium corrugated iron. Redmond Hillary. And Peter Jackson, who I discovered is really scared of wetters. This was a job from the Entertainment Weekly magazine in the States, and I was given a brief that I had to come up with something conceptual. And I knew that I only had about 20 minutes with him in Wellington. And so I went, I had this, obvious reasons, wetters. So I went to the museum and I sourced 2 wetters, a live one and a dead one, Wendy and Wayne, I called them. And so I travelled down to Wellington on this airplane with these little Tupperware with these 2 wetters on my lap, terrified because it was quite early on in my career. And I was sat there waiting, and it was waiting, and he wasn't ready, and he'd been up all night doing some edit on a shoot, on a film. And he eventually came out, and I was told I had 10 minutes with him, and I had to somehow coerce him into my idea, and then he just said, I hate wetters. He hated wetters, and he wouldn't go near a wetter. So it took a lot of persuasion to try and get this image, but which I actually managed to do. But I will say that it's not the live wetter. Most of my portraits that I'm doing are quite contrived. I mean, a portrait is usually contrived anyway when you're commissioned by somebody. But this is one of the rare portraits that is not contrived at all. And this is Jonah Lomu just after he'd come out of hospital, and he was really, really sick. You couldn't ask him to do anything. But I really love this portrait. To me, it's a very powerful image, and it's quite empathetic and quite gentle. So, so for me, I find that there's quite a musical element when I'm photographing people. It's all about the timing and the time of that decisive moment when your finger hits the shutter. It's a bit like an orchestra sort of composing a scene, composing a scene. And you're really multitasking majorly. You're composing. I find that I'm composing the image. You're trying to think technically, and also you're trying to really make somebody feel quite comfortable, which is a major component in photographing people, I believe. So it's a real dance and a rhythm that's created. And Cartier-Bresson, he really sums it up very well, that whole decisive moment. I just really thought this quote was very apt. To me, photography is the simultaneous recognition in a fraction of a second of the significance of an event, as well as of a precise organisation of forms which give that event its proper expression. I think that sums it up really well, the decisive moment. So all those portraits kind of end up in these sorts of places. So these are the sorts of jobs that I've been doing. This is my first cover that I ever shot in 1994, and that was on the basis of showing my portfolio of all those slide projections earlier of sort of bodies looking like garish skin conditions. So that goes to show that if you show your personal work that you really believe in, that can really kind of, win people over, or they see something in you that they'll want to try and take a chance on. So lots of kind of editorially stuff. I quite like using humour. I like humour in my imagery. I really enjoy creating an image for a cover because you have to be quite graphic and you have to really be thinking where the copy's going to go. Bit of fashion. This was a shoot in Samoa, a fashion shoot in Samoa, and this was the day that, or the day after that the big Japan earthquake happened. and we had spent the whole night terrified. We were staying in the hotel that was wiped out the previous tsunami, and we spent the whole night terrified that we were going to be wiped out again, waiting to be evacuated. And of course we had, we were fine. But then we had to go on and do, I think, 4 fashion spreads, 2 covers, and 1 other story the next day. So I do find that you have to have a bit of stamina in this job. We pulled it off. And I think New Zealand's a really small country, and I think it really pays to be a jack of all trades. So I do anything that I can put my eye to, I really put my hand up for. I don't think you can be too precious in a small country like this. Book covers, CDs, I mean anything. Green Party campaigns, TV shows, Shortland Street. It's all the bread and butter. Oh, this is a lovely job. I had to come up with an idea to photograph a casket in a sort of a visual way, so I took this casket out to Piha. So I also do interiors. I do people, but I've recently been doing a lot of interior work. I really enjoy getting into people's houses, into people's environments. It really tells a lot about who they are. And again, it's quite fun having a bit of fun with the graphic shapes that you can create. Bit of house porn. A lot of these places I've actually found through people I know or places I've come across in my travels. So you have to generate your own work a lot in this industry. So I'll take a little recce while I'm there, and then I'll propose that to the editor, and they'll say yay or nay. So throughout all this commercial work, I do the commercial work and the bread and butter, but I've always had this other side of me, and I've always had little projects that I've done. And one of the projects that I really wanted to do was this Love to Death Toys project, and having had a child, I just became quite interested in this whole idea of the object permanence over an object, how a toy gets so loved that it starts falling apart, and the more it falls apart, the more it's loved, and the more attached the child becomes to it. I was really quite interested in this. So I started taking a whole lot of portraits, about 10 years ago this was, of toys that I came across through friends, and this is Linus, who really was on his last legs, but he was very endearing. And they all had that's the lobotomised bunny. They all had their lovely little personalities. And I had this whole idea, I was going to have this big show and print them up larger than life, and I was going to have little stories, and I think I was going to do an installation with a tea party or a teddy bear's party. I was going to have a bit of fun with it. I was really excited about this. That's Pedal. Mitzi, whose little heart had come out. They darned up her heart. And this one was about this big, he was tiny little, sweet little thing. So anyway, I was really excited, and then one day my husband came home with this, and it just goes to show that if you have a really good idea, somebody else had done it, and done it brilliantly, better than I probably would have, and exactly the same, little stories, really beautiful work. And I guess what I got from that is that if you have an idea, you've got to act on it, because there's this whole collective consciousness thing out there that somebody else will do it if you don't. But that's okay. So another personal project I did about 13 years ago was, an exhibition. It was my first solo show, and it was all about the paradoxes and the contradictions of pregnancy and motherhood. And this project arose, it was at the Chiaroscuro Gallery, which is no longer, but it was in Queen Street. The prints were huge, they were larger than life. And it started when I did get pregnant, and then I had a miscarriage, which is another taboo subject. And I was so incredibly bereft and started romanticising this whole idea of having a baby. You get very caught up in it all. And to me, this idea of getting pregnant and having children became a very romantic thing. So I started taking all these images of double exposures again of torsos with beautiful things laid over them, really beautifying this beautiful shape of creation. And then what happened was that halfway through this project, I actually did become pregnant. And for every woman who does bloom and flourish and feel incredibly feminine, there are about 10 who don't, and whose lives are completely marred by pregnancy and find it really hard, vomit continually, can't get out of bed. It's a hard road, and I was one of those women. So I was really interested in this whole contrast, and I started taking these images that were more about the realities. When you're a mother, you have to go with the flow. When you're pregnant, you have to go with the flow. And when in the middle of this image capture, you can't actually see it on the screen, but this child actually did go with the flow and let rip this huge meconium splat. I caught it mid-air, but you can't see it there. It's a Madonna child. And then juxtaposing those with all these beautiful images of flowers. And this was a woman who just had a child, and she'd had to have a varicose vein operation because her legs were so ravaged by the pregnancy, and this was just after she'd come out of hospital. But I was really interested in juxtaposing her brand new baby's legs with these old, kind of these ravaged legs. But to me, these legs are still really beautiful. They're really quite monumental. They've done an amazing job. They've created this other human being. So, I didn't really see them as terrible at all. This is another lovely little cascade one of when you have a new child, you do end up being covered with vomit a lot of the time. And this one, mid-capture, this baby did this beautiful little cascade of vomit down her back, but you can't see it. It's a shame, but anyway. And the mundanities, washing. So that was kind of, my perspective back then. Now I'm going to really go off on a tangent. I'm going to talk about iPhones, phone photographs. I'm a really overcommitted person. I'm a really busy mum, and I'm a working mum, and I have found the phone incredibly liberating. I can effortlessly record moments in my everyday travels as I'm going about my everyday life and the chaos of it all. It's really pared back photography for me. It's just almost taken me back to when I was in my 20s with my little Pentax and the fixed lens. I can just see something and I effortlessly pull it out and I can just record it. And I find often when I travel, I will have my big camera with me, but I will often just default to the little phone because it's just there and it's easy and it's quick to pull out. And I'm just astounded at some of the images I can get out of it. And you can sort of print to this size now, and it's a wonderful thing. So I'm just going to show you, that was the Pride Parade, which we traumatised our daughter by taking her to just the wrong place at the wrong time, but anyway. So I'm just going to show a little slideshow. This is really quick and fast, and I apologise if you get oversaturated with images, but it just shows the variety that you can get on your phone. That's my visual diary. That's just my everyday. So yeah, the phone, a new genre of photography for me. Now I'm going to get really, I hope I haven't overloaded you, but now I'm going to get really eclectic and I'm going to talk about weddings. And I have to say I have encountered a little bit of professional snobbery around weddings. I remember my tutor looking sideways at me going, "You're not shooting a wedding, are you?" And I don't see weddings as the bottom rung of the photography ladder. I see them as an opportunity to take images. I don't do many these days because I'm just too overcommitted with other stuff. But for me, a wedding incorporates all the genres such as reportage, photojournalism, and still life, beauty, fashiony images, landscapey. To photograph a wedding, one really has to understand human psychology and work under pressure. It's not for the faint-hearted. There's also great social anthropology. It's fascinating what you see in a wall at a wedding, it's fascinating what one observes as a fly on the wall at a wedding. And I like to record all the sort of slightly unwedding moments. This was a cyclone, the day of a cyclone, and I had 5 minutes to set this shot up, and the lighting was really bad. So I find that you have to be very, very quick acting and very bossy. I'm told that I'm charmingly bossy, but you have to be very, very quick and compositionally correct to get the images. For me, also, there's a more meaningful element to this sort of work. It's a really important ritual that's being honoured. Loved ones are being recorded, and I find I get great joy and a sense of purpose from that sort of work. And I believe that you can only, I believe that if you can shoot a wedding, you can shoot anything, and you only get one shot at it. You can't do a reshoot. And just as frequent as a wedding, but not nearly as photographed, is a funeral. And I don't do many of those, but when I'm asked to do them, I will do them. But I consider it a real honour to photograph a funeral. They're very poignant gatherings. They're loaded with emotions, and they're a celebration of somebody's life. And one thing about a funeral is it gathers and it connects people. It's a rare opportunity to capture family groups and people who live overseas who only come back for that one occasion. This one funeral I photographed a few years ago is a really particularly important one for me. This is Lizzie, who we lived next door to for years in Kingsland, and she was like family, Lizzie. Lizzie was off on her dream adventure learning to surf in Mexico when she got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. She tragically caught a lift up a hill with some locals, and the vehicle went off the side of a cliff. So Lizzie and all the other occupants of the car did not survive. In that split second, Lizzie's life was over, which was completely unbelievable. It was really shocking. She was just such a clever, vibrant young woman who we all loved. The funeral was huge. She touched many people's lives. It made everyone conscious of their own mortality. Especially mine, as I realised how small and futile and brief life can be. It was quite a wake-up call. So Lizzie's death really taught me that you really have to live life and live life like there's no tomorrow. Really banish self-doubt and just get on with it. because you only get one chance. And so I embarked on this major project, which is the biggest one I've ever done, and it's still evolving. And I really feel like Lizzie's sitting on my shoulder, kind of there with me. And when I look back at all the projects that I've done throughout my life, it does seem apparent that they're all kind of progressing to this one point. This is a celebration of the cycle of life and the inevitability of the demise. So these are my arrangements that I do of honest and humble and imperfect flowers. I've spent most of my photographic career commercially photographing people and places to make them look better than ever. Great lighting within the world of photoshopping, making them look as good as possible. So now I'm on the journey of discovering depth, honesty, and the beauty of imperfection. These works, to me, are true, honest, and real. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just show you the images. I've got a collection of my favourite ones here, and I'm going to, I really love African music, so I put them to a little bit of African music, which I hope you'll enjoy, but I just thought it'd be quite nice just to sit and absorb the images. So sit back and enjoy for a moment or two. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this project for me. The images are all taken on this very humble ledge by my front door in the simplest of ways. It's completely natural lighting which comes from my front door, except for a couple which have got the back hall light on. The lighting is, completely simple and natural. The flowers are all mostly gathered from friends' gardens and roadside plantings. I'll usually have a pair of secateurs in my car just to snip a few on the ways en route somewhere. To me also, they're not all flowers, they're also plants that you wouldn't necessarily see in a vase. They're things like dandelions and scotch thistles and grasses. And I love the idea of elevating the humble and the overlooked to something quite special. It just creates a whole new sense of beauty. The vases, I have a vast collection. Really feeds my obsessive compulsive side. I've collected a lot from overseas on eBay. We have no more room in our house left. One day I might just have a massive auction and get rid of them. But the vases I see as vessels. And we are vessels, and we are all made up of vessels. Women are vessels that carry children. Vessels are containers. So I see one way of looking at these images as these are the containers of our lives, and the flowers and the plant life are the lives that are going on within them. That's one way of looking at them. So when I think about what I wanted to do with these images, I really want to bring beauty into the world quite simply. I'm very interested in these images ending up in hospitals and hospices. Currently there are, I think, 11 at Auckland Hospital, and it's lovely because it takes me back full circle to being a nurse. So I'm really working to develop that, and here and potentially overseas as well. I'm really excited about collaborating this project with Jeff Blackwell. Hopefully you'll hear Jeff. Publishing a book. It's going to be a limited edition. It was really interesting hearing Anita's talk about limited edition books, and I'm not sure exactly how many we're doing at this stage, but it will be available through, I think, the Black Asterix Gallery, which is where I show most of my work here in Auckland. I show the work in Auckland. It's continually shown there, and also down south in Marlborough and Blenheim and Nelson, and also at Matakana. And I'm just developing that, and it's all just happening organically. I really have some wonderful ideas to get them overseas. I really think that it's something that can travel and be appreciated overseas. So when I look back on this lifetime of images that I've shown you, it's incredibly multifaceted. It's kind of it is very eclectic. There's themes of life and death and the beauty within it all, the beauty within all the imperfections. And when I ask myself, very simply, why do I do what I do? It's just simply, very simply, it's my way of expressing myself and my way of communicating. And it fills up my heart. It's a very soulful thing to do. So thank you for coming and listening, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll bring my
Two. Here I am. Hello. Thank you. That was really enjoyable. You touched on a couple of things that people have asked about. One was, how has your nursing, how has that kind of affected your work? I think you kind of answered that.
I think being a people photographer, it really it's really enabled me to, I think anybody when they're confronted with a camera is vulnerable, and I think I guess I have a skill in being able to help people let go of that guard and to be able to relax and be some aspect of themselves.
Yeah.
So, and I think also you do learn to deal with life and death situations quite early. You know, I've worked in A&E clinics, I've worked in intensive care, so you learn how to deal with adrenaline and, you know, looking after people's lives and
drama, not be a drama queen in those environments. You can't be, can you?
Some people know me well might.
You also talked about weddings, and I think that was a really fair comment, that people do tend to look, you know, some people
they do.
know that,
and I have spent a lot of time apologising for the fact that I do weddings.
Weddings are actually really, really hard.
They're really hard.
And, you know, you can't really screw it up.
No, you can't.
It's not like, oh, sorry. And what advice would you have? I mean, when I do my occasional teaching gigs, they're very occasional because human resources normally get called in. A lot of the young students, even year ones, they go, "Oh yeah, I'm shooting a wedding for a friend this weekend," and I go, "Really? Don't do it. What if you screw it
Well,
up?"
that's what my tutor said to me.
But not from a snobbish thing, from a don't screw it up perspective. You know, what would you say to these
Well, I
people?
think it's just you've got to practice, and I just started just because friends would ask me, and it was just I think the way to do it is just find people that you know who are getting married and just, see if you can do it. I mean, you just don't charge that much to begin with. But it's also a great way that's how I bought my first cameras. That's how I funded myself through
I suppose I worry about these guys just screwing it up because they don't have a backup camera or the batteries go flat. Any one of those sort of horrible
that slight
things.
edge.
Yeah.
And I think you just get in and do it. I think, there's many situations in life where that can terrify you and you just get in there and do it.
Great. You mentioned Sally Mann before. Is she someone,
Oh yeah, I think her
hero?
image is exquisite. Beautiful, beautiful.
Where do you get your influences from? I mean, if there's so much.
I don't know, there's so much. I mean, I like many photographers. I don't know if anybody's, I like photography that really moves me and that slightly disturbs me and poses questions. I'm really interested in Joel Peter Whitcomb. Does anybody know his work? Very disturbing work, very black, dark. Apparently one of the top selling photographers in the States. Is that right, Anita? But very dark, very disturbing imagery. I love, Annie Leibovitz, of course, Sally Mann. I love John Fowles' landscapes, William Eggleston, all sorts of people. But I don't feel like I'm influenced. I mean, there's certainly images that I will sometimes be referencing, but I just do what I do. I don't know how I do it, I just do it.
How often, obviously today you've given everybody a big retrospective of your work, but you're looking at it too. How does that affect you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, at first when I did it, I thought, oh my God, this is all over the place. What are people going to think? I'm all over the place. But it does all kind of progress, I think. And it, I guess it explains aspects of who I am and how I've ended up doing what I'm doing now.
And how would you advise someone's asking, how does one get their start doing editorial portraits?
I think you just get in there and do it.
Yeah.
I was terrified. You just take your work in there and you just say, here I am. And that was the same for the gallery. I just had this collection of work and I really believed in it. And I just knocked on the door one day and just went in and said, here I am. It was a huge risk.
And how would you describe, how do you curate your portfolio? I mean, are you looking for, what's the message you're trying to tell, the story you're trying to tell? Because portfolios are very hard.
I don't really have a portfolio. Right. I just have images that I show. I mean, I don't really have a portfolio. I have a website and I don't really have a formal portfolio. I've had portfolios in the past, but I got too busy that I haven't really kind of got a proper portfolio now. That's a good problem
to have, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being too busy. Let's have a look. Yeah, so we touched on this before, about how does your wedding and commercial work affect people's perception of you? Because there's a bit of snobbery in the art world,
you know. I just don't really care.
No.
I just think, bugger it, stuff them.
Bugger them.
Okay, thank you. Who cares? I mean, I don't care. I think it's kind of slightly precious and pretentious, just quietly. But I mean, that's sadly the world we work in sometimes, operate in. And I am who I am, and I do what I do, and that's the most important thing.
So I think if any of you need a takeaway from ImageNation, bugger them is probably quite a good one.
Just believe in yourself and do what you do, I think.
Again, you're not the first to say that ImageNation. It's really nice to hear that common thread of people saying, do what you think is good. Jeff Blackwell said yesterday, just do good stuff and it'll all kind of work out in the end, and I think that's very true. And I think young photographers chase their tails a bit and think, oh, maybe I should do it like this because maybe that person will like it if I do it that way. And
well, I have to say that does enter into my psyche every now and then. In fact, and I have some good people in my life who just reel me in and say, for God's sake, shut up. Shut up.
Shut up and do good work.
Yeah, absolutely. Good motto.
And what does the future hold for you?
Well, I don't know. I'm doing this lovely book with Jeff, and I have plans to try and get that work overseas. I have plans for other projects that I would like to do, personal projects. I always wanted to go to art school, but I just have never kind of gotten around to it. I actually did get into do RMIT, a master's in RMIT in fine arts, but then I got pregnant, so that kind of put that off to the back burner. But I'm just doing what I do.
Interesting that Dean yesterday was talking about going back to school as well. And
Yeah,
how
but
much
I
he
love
enjoyed
the
that.
idea of having these communities that Anita's setting up where you can actually go together and educate yourselves and discuss and talk. I think that's a wonderful thing. I'll be really keen to come and join in with that, Anita.
And that's that whole thing about, photographers, stop hiding in the corner and, talk to each other
absolutely.
and share.
And support each other. Because photography can be quite a lonely existence, and it's a very competitive existence as well. So it is easy to be in that little corner on your own, sort of imagining what everybody else is thinking.
Yeah,
So I
and
think
you
it's
need
just about
feedback, don't you?
embracing people and coming together and discussions.
And doing what you've just done today, show people all your work and
Yeah,
see how that goes.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
fantastic. Thank you,
You're
ladies and
welcome.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Take them all cheers.